The U-Haul truck was parked in my assigned spot when I pulled into the parking lot. It was a pretty crappy morning, and I was in a nasty mood anyway. I parked in one of the nearby visitor spots, got out of my car, and headed for the truck to tell someone to get the damn thing out of the way, when just then she came out of the back of the truck with a flashlight in her hand. All thoughts of me being a raving lunatic instantly melted away when I saw her. She was incredibly beautiful. She walked down the ramp, heading toward the empty townhouse next to mine. Could I have been so lucky? Could this beautiful creature have been my new neighbor? I only saw her for a second, but it was enough. When she walked through the door, I couldn't help but notice how her yoga pants accentuated her gorgeous ass and those long legs. Whoever invented yoga pants must have a special place in heaven where every pure-blooded heterosexual male can stop by and thank him, or her for that matter. I decided to wait by the truck until the pretty woman came back out so I could introduce myself and offer to help. When she reappeared, she was followed by a giant man on her heels. Son of a bitch, I thought to myself. Looks like I'm not going to have any luck today. As they approached, I held out my hand. Hi, I'm your 1C roommate, Sam Jenkins. A woman squeezed in front of the man and took my hand. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Lori Turner. I tried my best to look into her blue eyes as we shook hands. It was difficult because, in addition to her yoga pants, she was wearing a sleeveless t-shirt tight enough to dispel any doubt that she wasn't wearing a bra underneath. She turned to face the man behind her and introduced us. This is my brother, Raymond Grant. He was nice enough to come all the way from Quincy to help me move in. Raymond took my hand, and while he shook it in a friendly manner, there was an expression in his eyes that I recognized as, "Don't you dare damn well try to get into my little sister's panties." I decided I couldn't blame him and took the direct route of addressing him. Can I help you with the big stuff? Well, Raymond wasn't stupid. He took me up on my offer. Thank you. Could you help me with this dresser first? I grabbed the top, he grabbed the bottom, and we carried it all into the apartment while he talked. It's a lot easier that way. Lori helped load the stuff into the truck. She's a strong woman, but I think she's a little worn out. It's nice to have someone fresh to help unload the truck. I have to hit the road tonight, work in the morning. When we walked into the bedroom, I saw a little girl sitting at a small desk, coloring. Another introduction from Lori, who followed us in with a box. Michelle, this is Mr. Jenkins. He's going to be our new neighbor. Sam, this is my daughter, Michelle. Michelle got up from her chair to turn to face me. I held out my hand and was surprised when she immediately put her tiny palm in mine. It's very nice to meet you, Michelle. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. And I couldn't think of what to say since I had never spent much time with children, so I decided to resort to the old-fashioned way. How old are you, Michelle? I'm 4.5. Thank goodness Raymond interrupted us. Let's get the dresser for the other bedroom now. What must have been Lori's dresser was bigger than the baby's, but we had no trouble fitting it in the master bedroom. Then the child's bed frame. I noticed there was no bed in the master bedroom and asked about it. Lori replied, My bed and mattress will be delivered tomorrow. The old one is still at my ex's place. I have a small mattress in my spare room. It's full. We can bring it in for the night so you don't have to sleep on the floor. Lori started to argue with me, but I just grabbed Raymond's hand and said, Let's go. We went to my place and the two of us carried the mattress into Lori's room. I'm going to leave you alone now. Call me tomorrow to pick it up. If your bed is delayed, don't worry. I'm not expecting guests anytime soon. I walked out as they both thanked me. My thoughts were on how I was going to learn more about this beautiful lady. I sat down on my couch with a glass of cold beer, closed my eyes, and mentally pictured her. All the next week, my work schedule was crazy. We were finishing up an important project, and I ended up spending 3 of the 5 nights sleeping on the couch in my office. We finished at 1 p.m. on Friday, and I treated my staff to drinks at the pub around the corner to thank them for the successful completion. The monetary reward would come later after the client paid us. Most of the staff left as soon as happy hour was over, eager to get home to their loved ones as soon as possible. I had nowhere and no one to be with, so John Plagg and I spent another couple hours at the bar. By 8 o'clock, I was too drunk to drive. The bartender, Sarah, called a cab to take me home. I fell asleep right in my clothes and didn't wake up until 10 o'clock Saturday morning. I hadn't seen Lori for the previous week, and frankly, I was too busy to think much about it. While I was sitting on the back porch, the sliding glass door to Lori's apartment opened, and she came out with Michelle. Michelle was dressed in a cute bathing suit, and Lori was wrapped in a blanket. Michelle was the first to notice me. "Hi, Mr. Jenkins." Before I could respond, Lori turned to me. "Hi, Sam. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Lori. Going swimming?" "Yes, I know. Yes, but remember, I was still hungover." Michelle answered my stupid question. "We're going to the pool. Do you want to watch me swim? I took lessons last year." Lori started to apologize, but I wouldn't let her. "Yeah, I'd like to. I'll be down to the pool in a few minutes. You and your mom go ahead." Lori threw me a look that I interpreted as, "Are you sure?" I ignored her silent question and went into my apartment to get another cup of coffee and a towel. Lori and Michelle walked across the lawn to our pool. By the time I got to the pool, Michelle was playing in the shallow children's section, and Lori was lounging on a chaise lounge nearby. Lori had taken off her bedspread. She was wearing a mom bikini that completely covered her breasts and buttocks, but it made her look sexy. Thanks to my dark sunglasses, I was able to view her body without giving the impression of an evil pervert. Most of what I saw confirmed my first impressions of her when she wore those yoga pants and t-shirt the day she moved in. Lori had a slender build, long legs, and beautiful feet. Her breasts were a little small, the kind that wouldn't sag when she reached middle age, but still full enough to accommodate a man's palm. Her blonde hair was gathered in a ponytail, just as it had been last Sunday. All in all, Lori was a beautiful young woman. We sat side by side, watching Michelle closely and sharing how I got here stories. Lori began. "I got married when I was 18 to my high school boyfriend. We had only been married for a year when the condom didn't work and I got Michelle pregnant. It drove Michael out of his mind. He wasn't ready to be a father and still wanted to enjoy life, drinking and partying and running around with his friends. He wanted me to terminate the pregnancy and I refused, and our marriage gradually fell apart. He spent more and more time away from home. He works on a fishing boat, spends months in Alaska and months unemployed here, spending the money he makes in Alaska. I won't go into details, but I decided to leave him and served him with divorce papers 2 weeks ago. After that, my brother showed up with U-Haul and helped me move into this complex. I could see that Lori was struggling to hold back tears as she told the story of the breakup of her marriage. What did Michael do when he got the divorce papers? That's the really sad part. Michael just stood there holding the papers, and there was almost relief on his face even though he didn't sign the papers. I served him the day before he was supposed to leave on his flight again. I figured it would give us time to think about how we would split up Michelle's visits and such. It also gave me a chance to move out of our apartment without him pestering us. "You said your family still lives in Quincy. Why didn't you move back there?" 2 reasons. I didn't want to put too much distance between Michelle and her daddy, just in case he pulled his head out of his ass and decided to be a father to her. And 2, I have a great job at the refinery. The pay is great, and Michelle's daycare is a few kilometers from the refinery. I even have lunch with her a couple times a week. Nowhere in Quincy pays that well, even if a person with my references could find a job there besides waitressing. I could tell that the conversation had thrown Lori off balance, and she hadn't yet told me about the straw that had forced her to ask for a divorce. She was quiet for a bit, then got up and sat by the kiddie pool talking to Michelle. I'm almost ashamed to admit that I watched her ass as she walked there. 10 minutes later, Lori was back in her break room. "So, tell me, Sam, what's your story?" "I married the most beautiful, sexiest woman I'd ever dated when I was 26. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. Unfortunately, after 2 years, we both realized that we couldn't spend that many hours in bed. The rest of our time was spent pursuing different activities and goals. She liked antiquing, hanging around charity stores and garage sales every weekend. I liked fishing. I wanted kids, and she changed her mind about kids after several of our friends had children. Suddenly, she called our friends' kids rugrats and swore she would never have any. That's just the tip of it. There are too many different values and goals to realize. Had we been smart and sought counseling before marriage, someone might have convinced us not to get married, maybe. We were that attracted to each other. Opposites may attract, but they don't always make for a strong relationship. I will say this, we didn't cheat on each other. One day she gave me the "we need to talk" speech and explained why we shouldn't stay married. I couldn't disagree and we went our separate ways. Consensual divorce? I still see her from time to time. We are still friends, kissing cheeks and all. Neither of us remarried. That was 3 years ago. Lori listened intently, not taking her eyes off Michelle in the pool. I decided to take a chance. Lori, would you and Michelle like to join me for a barbecue tonight or tomorrow? Without hesitating, Lori replied, "Yes, that would be great. I don't have anything planned for tonight, and tomorrow we will be busy. What can I bring? I'm making a delicious potato salad." "Bring it over. I'll see you at 6:30, okay?" "Yeah, I'm off. Didn't want to rush things on the first morning. We'd have a lot more time to get to know each other better this evening." That first barbecue went well. We stayed away from the heavy stuff and talked about our work. Over the next few weeks, the three of us got together for dinner at least once a week. One thing became obvious. Lori was still in love with Michael. I decided we were close enough friends to ask the question that had no answer. "Lori, what did Michael do that made you move out and file for divorce?" Lori hesitated before answering, first checking to see if Michelle was busy with the Disney movie on TV. "Last time he came back from Alaska and gave me an STD. When I came home from my doctor and confronted him face to face, he denied it. He said I must have cheated on him, called me all kinds of foul words. Said Michelle probably wasn't his since he always used a condom when she was conceived, and I obviously slept with other guys without protection. He said I didn't start taking the pill until after Michelle was born so I wouldn't get caught again. We had a terrible fight. I told him he was the only man I'd ever been with in my entire life. And it's true. I've never been with anyone but Michael. I offered to go to marriage counseling with him, but he refused. The swearing and name-calling got worse and worse over the next 2 weeks. I couldn't take it anymore and went to an attorney to start the divorce. And here I was. I sat listening to Lori's sad story and thought how awful it must be to truly love another person and not be able to save a marriage. At least my ex-wife and I had mutually agreed to part ways. After Lori finished, I almost regretted asking her that question. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. Later that week, I considered asking Lori out on a real adult date. But before I could get a word in edgewise, Lori launched into a tirade. "Some guy at work asked me out tonight." I talked to my mom about it, and she thinks I should wait until the divorce papers are signed before I start dating. She said that any decent guy would respect the fact that legally and morally I am still married in the eyes of the state and the church. I sat and listened, silently thanking this guy for getting ahead of me and taking all the hits. I'm pretty sure I dodged that one. 2 weeks after that conversation, who should have shown up at her apartment but Michael, back from Alaska? For the next week, I hardly saw Lori, only a quick hello and the occasional brief exchange of pleasantries. One evening, I was sitting on the porch drinking a beer when he came out of her patio door. "What's up with you and my wife, asshole?" It only took me half a second to appreciate him. He was one of those guys who use bravado to compensate for his size and lack of intelligence. I got up from my chair and walked over to him. Since I am 190 centimeters tall with a weight of 95 kilograms and I keep myself in shape, I towered over him. I reached out my hand to push him away, appearing friendly. "I'm Sam. Not too many people call me an asshole, at least no one with teeth." You could tell by the look in his eyes that he was thinking, should I take my chances with this guy and keep acting tough? Or should I pretend to be friendly without backing down too much? It took him too long to answer his own question, so I just continued. "Lori and I are neighbors. There's nothing else going on between us." I thought about saying more, thought about telling that jackal that he was the one cheating, but I held my tongue because it wasn't my fight. Lori was a friend, but I had no right to stick my nose in her business. I just hoped she'd figure the bastard out and end the divorce. It wasn't altruism on my part. Over the past 2 months, I had fallen in love with her. Lori was not only physically beautiful, she was kind to others, a good mother and a good friend. She even enjoyed fishing. Lori and Michelle had already spent 2 days on my boat. Her only flaw, as far as I could tell, was her inability to cut the rope with Michael. Meanwhile, I tried to keep my cool. There is nothing more desperate than a man waiting for his time, waiting for the woman he loves to dump some loser. I sat down again, ignoring Michael standing there, and continued drinking my beer. Michael turned and walked back to Lori's apartment. Up until that evening, I was unaware of the extent of Lori and Michael's reunion, but Michael made sure I found out tonight. He left the patio door open with the curtain pulled back, most likely so that Lori wouldn't know the door was still open. 10 minutes later, I heard them in her living room, just on the other side of the patio door. Michael was talking louder than necessary. "I'm going to put you on the couch until you beg me to stop." I had heard enough, went back to my apartment and closed the patio door. Over the next month, Michael was at Lori's apartment more often than not. He continued to convince me that he was using her sexually whenever the opportunity presented itself. Lori would say hello as we walked by until one day she stopped me as I was walking out to my car. "Sam, why aren't you talking to me anymore? Should I tell her?" I thought about it for a moment before answering in the least confrontational way possible. "Lori, Michael has made it clear that he doesn't want me hanging around you." Lori seemed surprised by my answer. "Why should he care? Some guys can't handle their woman being friends with another man. They view every interaction between a man and a woman in terms of their thinking. Men and women can't be friends, only sexual partners." I could see that Lori was thinking about what I had just said. She changed tactics. "Michelle misses you. She misses you reading to her. Well, maybe it's time for Michael to take over that role." Lori laughed, but it was a sad laugh. "I won't hold my breath, Sam. He still barely acknowledges Michelle's existence. And to think I named her Michelle, so he'd think she was named after him. I wanted to name my first daughter after my grandmother, but I thought Michael might bond with his daughter if she had basically the same name. I'm such an idiot." I couldn't argue with that. "Tell Michelle that Sam says hi." And I got into my car without another word. Lori told me the whole story 2 days after it happened. I got a call from an old high school friend. She saw Michael at his usual bar flirting with another woman. She told me they left the bar together. She followed them and saw them get into Michael's pickup truck. She immediately called me. Annoyed, I put the sleeping Michelle in her car seat and headed to the bar. Through Michael's windshield, I saw that they were naked. I didn't know Lori was capable of that. She must have been really pissed off because what she did next stunned me. Unbeknownst to the two bastards, I took a picture of them on my cell phone. It turned out pretty good. It was easy to see the woman's face and the ring on her finger. I pulled Michelle out of the car seat, still asleep, went into the bar and asked if anyone there knew the name of the whore who slept with my husband on the street. Everyone has enemies, and apparently one of the whore's enemies was sitting at the bar. "Yeah, her name is Glenna Forbes," said one obliging customer. I turned to the Good Samaritan. "Do you know her husband?" The Samaritan smiled. He was obviously pleased with himself when he told me his name was Ted Forbes, and he worked nights at the Tesoro refinery. I couldn't believe my luck as I work in the administrative office, and it wouldn't have been hard at all to get his contact information. I thanked the Samaritan and spotted my friend in one of the booths. With a silent, grateful smile, I left the bar and headed home. Lori was quiet for a second before finishing her story. "Michael, thank goodness, didn't stop by that night. When I woke up, I was glad the asshole hadn't crawled into bed with me. Apparently, he spent the night at our old apartment after he was done with the whore." I got dressed, packed Michelle up for daycare, and headed to work. It only took me 5 minutes to find Ted Forbes' cell phone number in the personnel file. By 9 a.m., a picture had been sent to his phone. What I hadn't considered was that I had just used my own cell phone to send the picture, and the knucklehead must have told his wife how he knew, and she must have told Michael. I think this would be a good time to tell the reader that Lori was telling her story as we sat at my kitchen table and her left eye was still black and blue. "Are you going to press charges against Michael?" Lori stunned me with her answer. "No, I'm just going to get a divorce. If I send him to jail, he'll never be able to pay child support, and I can't afford to miss that check. I hope he goes back to Alaska soon." I thought Lori was making a big mistake, but my mom always taught me that you can't fix stupid things and that you should avoid getting overly involved in other people's problems. I remember what she said when my Uncle Dennis informed us that he was going to marry an exotic dancer. You can't argue with crazy. Uncle Dennis and the stripper divorced within a year. So I figured I'd let Lori figure out what she wanted to do on her own and keep my mouth shut. Maybe the police or her family would have better luck convincing her to sign a complaint against Michael. The police came to her apartment later that day, and as I found out later, she didn't have much better luck. Around this time, an opportunity presented itself to me that was too good to pass up. One of our West Texas branches needed a project manager for a wind farm after the previous project manager had a heart attack. That meant up to 4 weeks on a construction site while the guy recovered from surgery. My boss offered a big bonus if I would get there and keep the project on schedule. 2 days after my conversation with Lori, I flew to Midland. For the next 3 weeks, I didn't have much time to think about Lori's problems. After all, we were still just friends, and I wasn't responsible for her. Yet. I spent 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, working on the wind farm project. I was exhausted by the time the guy I was filling in for came back to work. He and I spent 3 days together making sure everything was done properly before I got on the plane that was supposed to take me home. I got back to my apartment, and just a few hours later, there was a knock on the door. I opened the door and saw Lori standing there holding Michelle's hand. Lori looked terrible. She had lost weight and generally looked exhausted. I motioned for her to come in and sit down and asked if I could get her anything. Lori just shook her head. "Welcome home, Sam. I've missed you these past few weeks. You've been such a good friend since Michelle and I moved here. It's good to have you home." "What's going on, Lori?" "Sam, I didn't come here to burden you with my problems. Michelle saw that you were home and wanted to see you. She's hoping you'll read to her soon. Maybe I can make dinner one night this week. You can come over and have a snack and read to Michelle. I bet it's been a long time since you've had a home-cooked meal, unless you've fallen for one of the Texas girls." Lori actually smiled when she said that. It was nice to see a smile on that sad face. My calendar is blank. I didn't expect to be home so soon, so yes, I would love it if we could have dinner this week. I picked Michelle up and put her on my lap. "And I'd love to tell you a bedtime story." Michelle gave me a hug. I looked back at Lori. And no, I hadn't found any Texas girls to spend time with. Mostly I was just working. Lori kept a smile on her face. "What should I make?" "Anything but barbecue. I think I ate at least a whole cow there. Lori made a great salmon dinner. The food was enjoyable, but there was an unspoken cloud hanging over the dining table. Lori kept staring at the front door, as if waiting for something to happen. She didn't need to say it. I knew what she was thinking. What would happen if Michael showed up and caught me sitting at the table with her and Michelle? When we finished eating, Michelle went into the living room to watch TV. Lori watched her leave the room. After reading Lori's mind, I had to ask, "What about the restraining order?" Lori looked at me and chose her words carefully, as if she were talking to herself. "Do you really think a man who's willing to go to jail for hurting his wife is going to be stopped by a piece of paper? I had a neighbor when I was a kid. She got tired of being a punching bag for her old man. She pressed charges and got a restraining order. The guy bailed her out, showed up at their house, and beat the crap out of her. She ended up spending 3 weeks in the hospital, and her kids ended up in childcare." Lori's response gave me food for thought, and shortly after I read Michelle's story, I went back to my house. I had already decided that I needed to do something about it. The problem was what? I sat in my deep armchair with the first of several glasses of bourbon and thought about it for a while. It would be nice if this asshole could be run out of town and never come back. It would be nice, though if I threatened to, there would be no way to make sure he didn't retaliate. I'd have to watch my back every minute of every day. Not a good way to live. Unlike many stories, I didn't have any friends, Navy SEALs, or mobsters that I could ask to threaten Michael's life, to scare him to death in a way that he wouldn't realize I was behind it. No matter what scenario I ran through my head, it boiled down to one thing. Michael would have to disappear forever. For the first time in my life, I thought about taking the life of another human being. Sure, it looks so easy on TV and in the movies. Kill someone and dispose of the corpse. Go about your business as if nothing had happened. I knew it wasn't. I know 2 guys who took a life. One was an Iraq War veteran, and the other was a police officer who returned fire on a man who intended to kill him. Both told me how hard it was to deal with their feelings. And so I sat in my cozy den thinking about Michael and whether I could cut his life short. In many ways, I thought it was the only way to save Lori and Michelle. But who made me judge, jury, and executioner? 2 days later, that question was answered. I heard screaming in the neighborhood and the sound of a slamming door. Looking out the window of my house, I saw Michael get into his truck and drive away. I walked over to Lori's apartment and knocked on the door. When there was no answer, I opened the door and looked inside. Lori was lying on the floor with her arms around Michelle. Both were crying hysterically. As I knelt down next to them, I saw something that horrified me. A small part of Michelle's head was bald. "How?" was all I could squeeze out. We were eating dinner when Michelle spilled the milk. Michael freaked out. He lifted Michelle off the chair by her hair. Her hair broke off. He didn't have enough hair to support her full weight. "Why was he even here? I thought you were going to keep him away after the last incident." "He asked to stop by to discuss a visitation schedule. He said he was sorry about my eye. He sounded so sincere." "Lori, you have to call the police." "I can't." The last thing he said before he ran out of here was, "If I call the police, he'll kill me and Michelle." There was nothing I could say to change her mind. I stood there silently. Michael had just signed his own death certificate. The what question had been answered. Now how? How could you kill another human being and not get caught? It took me a full week to develop and refine my plan. Michael didn't show up at Lori's apartment during that week, but I followed him several times in a rental car and learned that Michael was a man of habit. Growing up, my mom loved watching detectives and murder mysteries. 2 shows I watched with her were Columbo and Monk, both with eccentric detectives who always solved the case. So I knew there was no such thing as a perfect murder, only one that left few clues, and this was especially important. The killer couldn't be complacent. I thought it through as if it were a working project. By listing all the components, I was sure I knew how I was going to do it. Rarely does anyone stay late on weekdays at the marina where I moor my fishing boat. I parked my truck in the parking lot and walked down to my boat where I hung a small flag on the cabin door. The flag was a warning to any unexpected overnight visitors that the boat owner had a female guest on board. Very similar to the ties we used to hang on the doorknob of our dorm room, alerting our roommates, saying that we were entertaining a member of the opposite sex. Essentially, the flag meant stay away. I went back to the truck and picked up the used motorcycle I had bought earlier down south in Everett. I pulled the hood over my head and rode the 3 miles to the tavern where Michael spent almost every evening. I abandoned the motorcycle a block from the tavern and walked the rest of the way. Michael's truck was parked there. Since it was semi-rural, it wasn't locked. I turned off the overhead light and waited in the back seat for Michael to get out. An hour later, which seemed much longer to me, Michael came out of the bar and climbed into the driver's seat. No one had gotten out with Michael, so this was my chance. This was one of my many fears. If someone had gotten out at the same time as Michael, I'd have to hide in the backyard until we got to his driveway. If Michael was lucky enough to pick up some slut, I planned to beat them both up and get the hell out of there. I'd wait for another opportunity. I wasn't going to kill 2 people. As soon as Michael got into his truck and before he started it, I hit him with the stun gun, then immediately covered his head and upper body with a black plastic garbage bag, wrapping it tightly around his neck. The bag served 2 purposes. It choked him, and I didn't need to see his face as he bled out. I climbed into the front seat. Scotch tape tied his hands and feet together, just in case. I pushed him into the passenger seat and drove off. There was still no sign of life at the marina. I parked Michael's truck in the parking lot and carried the lifeless body to my boat, leaving it in the galley before locking it up again. I drove Michael's truck a kilometer to a spot where there is a descent to the cove. The water there is 15 meters deep, and it would be a while before anyone would know there was a vehicle underwater. I put the truck in reverse and it drove off the cliff. I walked back to my boat and left the dock. Less than a couple of kilometers from shore, the strait is over 70 meters deep. It was still dark and the cloud cover almost completely obscured the moonlight. I pulled Michael's body back out and stuffed it into one of my crab traps. It took some maneuvering to get him in there. I didn't want to start slicing into pieces unless it was necessary. Fortunately, he was a short guy and couldn't have been more than 170 centimeters and maybe 70 kilograms. With some effort and a little bending over, his whole body fit into the 1/3 cubic meter trap. Just in case, I put a 12-kilogram weight in there with him. Through the transom doorway and over the stern, the trap disappeared from sight. I waited a few hours and started fishing. I caught a wild Chinook that I had to throw back, but kept when I caught a half-meter-long hatchery Chinook that I could keep. At 8 in the morning, I was back at the dock. No sooner had I tied up the boat than a Fish and Wildlife Conservation officer approached. "Do you mind if I look in your icebox?" It was a rhetorical question, of course. I had no choice. I opened the chest and he looked inside. He confirmed that it was a hatchery fish. "Had any traps been set today?" My heart was racing, but I tried my best to remain calm as I answered, "Not today." "How many traps do you have on board?" "Each person on board is allowed to have no more than 2 traps in these waters. More than 2 earns a fine." "Only 1? Why only 1? I was starting to get annoyed with this guy. "Because that's all I have for today. I'm not even using it. It's only been here since last week. What kind of questions?" He seemed remorseful. "I'm sorry. In the last 2 weeks, I've had to find 5 or more boats with too many traps for the amount of catch on board. The bosses are asking us to keep a closer eye on what's going on." I could see he was trying to make amends, so I let him off the hook. "Well, anyone who takes more than they're allowed deserves to be bitten. I fish these waters all the time and stay within my limits." We parted ways and I started breathing again. Michael wasn't reported missing for almost a full week. When someone did start asking where he had been, it took the police another 2 days before entering his apartment. Suspicion of foul play arose when it was discovered that he had not brought any clothes or other personal items with him. Lori was eventually questioned, and they even talked to me once. Without any witnesses or leads, the investigation stalled and went unsolved. Probably didn't help that no one cared about the asshole, not even his junky mom. As hard as it was to believe, Lori seemed upset by Michael's sudden disappearance. I was giving Lori plenty of space, trying not to rush her. We still had dinner at least once a week. 2 weeks after Michael's disappearance, Lori brought up the subject again. I couldn't hold my tongue. "Lori, this man beat you and abused your daughter. I don't understand why you're not glad he's gone." "You don't understand, Sam. Michael's been my boyfriend since junior high school. He's my first and only lover. He's the father of my daughter. He may have hit me, but I think he really loved me. It was just hard for him to show his love the way normal people do. He was raised by a woman who used drugs, and they had a succession of men coming into their home. Michael told me how some of these men beat his mom. Sometimes he had to listen to her being had in the next room, and sometimes there was more than one man with her. Don't you understand? A boy growing up in that kind of environment can't become normal. I did everything I could to show him love and to help him heal. What could I say? How do you question or respond to such a statement?" I decided to leave it alone. Maybe time would open her eyes and change her mind. I thought to myself, take your time, be her friend. When the time comes, let her know how you feel and how you can take care of her and Michelle, how we can become a family. A week later, my boss asked me to return to Texas to resume managing the wind farm project. The former manager had returned to work too soon and had relapsed. The stress was too much for him and he was forced into early retirement. That would mean I would be there for at least 3 or 4 months, but maybe that was for the best. Being around Lori without letting her know how much I loved her was becoming too hard. In the 4 months I was gone, I only went back to DC once. It was after the first month and only for a weekend. Lori, Michelle, and I had dinner, and I read to Michelle before bed. It was a nice, friendly evening. Lori seemed reconciled to the fact that Michael might not be coming back. Sunday morning, I headed back to Texas. It was Friday evening, months later, when I returned from completing the project. I didn't see Lori and Michelle until Sunday evening. Michelle was the first to see me as I sat on the back patio. She came out of their patio and gave me a hug before showing me the doll that Uncle Jeff had given her. Lori and some tall, dark-haired guy came out a few minutes later. Lori seemed cheerful. "Sam, you're home. What a surprise." She looked at her companion. Jeff, this is the neighbor I was telling you about. Sam, this is Jeff. I stood up to shake Jeff's hand. He took my hand, but I could see he didn't really want to meet me. Lori didn't notice anything. Lori seemed to want to stay and chat. She asked me 2 questions about my stay in Texas before Jeff interrupted her and told Lori and Michelle that it was time to head back. He was hungry and it was time to eat. I only talked to Lori one more time after that. It was the following Wednesday. Lori came in to see me and told me how she and Jeff met at work, how he had swept her off her feet with a torrid affair, how Jeff was in love with Michelle and hoped to be her adoptive father someday. Finally, she stopped talking about the wonderful and gorgeous Jeff. Sam, thank you for all the times you listened to my tales of woe. Thank you for being my friend. I'm moving in with Jeff next week, and we plan to be married in 7 or 8 months. That's how long it will take to finalize my divorce from Michael, since he never signed the papers before he disappeared. I probably won't get many chances to see you again. Jeff doesn't think it's right for a married woman to have a male friend. In that sense, he's as old-fashioned as Michael. When I asked if we could invite you to our wedding, he didn't think it was a good idea. He thought people would start talking. I told him that you and I had never done anything to be ashamed of, but he thought it was better not to give people a reason to think otherwise. I'm sorry, Sam. When Jeff showed up the next week to vacate her apartment, I was off fishing. Jeff's smirk as I walked to my truck told me all I needed to know. Epilogue. 5 years later. I haven't seen or spoken to Lori in 5 years. I get a Christmas card from her every December. Inside is always one of those photocopied sheets that tells the recipient all the family news. Lori and her husband had a daughter 3 years ago, and last year she had a baby boy. All seems to be well in her world, but I wonder, did she trade one abusive asshole for another? Truth be told, I don't know and I don't care. I date a few, but I've never had a serious relationship with any of the ladies. I mostly focus on advancing my career. In other words, I stand high on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, am close to self-actualization, and am pretty happy if you ignore the fact that I haven't found the right woman for a long-term loving relationship. Last summer, a group snorkeling in the Sound Strait came across a truck at the bottom of the bay. Police found out it belonged to Michael Turner and reopened the investigation into his disappearance. They came and talked to me. Some clever detective, or maybe they do it with computers now, related the fact that his truck was found near where I keep my boat, and that I was once Lori's neighbor. They even politely asked if they could search my truck and boat. I let them. What the hell? There was no way they were going to find any DNA, but I guess they had to go by the book. I suppose there may come a time when they come to my door and take me away. I'm not really worried, but I do want the nightmares to stop. I saw a Western movie once. The bandit said it best. It shows you that sooner or later you have to answer for every good deed. Pretty cynical, I know, but that's how I feel. Yeah, you don't have to say it. I should have known better.